over the internet. All right. Technology's finally cooperated. The speakers are working and internet is working, and here we are. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to A Democrat and Republican Walk into a Bar. Back into our virtual space, by the way, like haven't gotten into a new bar yet because we actually have some really amazing changes coming, as you are probably noticing, as you see my lovely new co-host here, Christy McLaughlin. Welcome, Christy.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. For those of you that don't remember and don't know or haven't read or seen anything, let me tell you a little bit about Christy and our history together. So, Christy and I actually first got acquainted in, what was it, 2013?
It had to have been, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Which was my very first year at FGCU. And Christy was in my very first class. And she was my very favorite student for many, many years. She was such an amazing student. I used to show this video extra credit project that she made like every year for about 8 years because it was so good. And so she was my student then. And then we reconnected back on the campaign trail in 2020 when we were both running for Congressional District 19 right here in Florida, and she was in the Republican primary and I was in the Democratic primary. I run my primary. Christy unfortunately had like 8,000 Republicans to run against, and yeah. Actually won that primary and then went on to be our congressman here in Southwest Florida. So that was kind of the last time that we had like connected on the campaign trail, and it was super fun to like see, you know, student and teacher across the aisle doing stuff. And then of course, because we're both like the underdogs in our races as well, we were like chatting and texting back and forth about like all the stuff that was going on with our competitors. And I think we were the only women in the race, right, Christy?
We were.
Yeah.
We were.
So
we like definitely represented.
Right. And so we were kind of like, all these guys, blah, blah, blah.
Well, the best part was once we figured it out, at first we didn't recognize each other because it had been so many years. It had been 7 years since we had last seen each other. And then once you made a comment saying, oh, and I've taught global studies at FGCU, I was like, wait a minute, Professor Banyai? I was like, hold on. I just made this connection. And we would literally, even though we were on opposite sides of the aisle and we did not agree with each other at all, remember it was online debates because it was the peak of COVID, and we'd be literally texting each other like under the desk, like, good answer. Like, or like, we'd like make little jokes during the debates. I'm like, you know, I don't like what you said, but I respect it.
Right. Like that. Yeah. And I think that was really good. And yeah, it was like the crazy COVID time. But yeah, you know, I think, and that's why it was like a really natural thing to invite Christy to be our new host, as our former co-host stepped off so he could run for Cape Coral City Council. Because I knew that, you know, Christy, first of all, is super smart, educated, like knows her stuff. And loves to debate, got super feisty compared to like what the first year student that she was, who was just in the class saying, oh, well, I think all of this stuff. And she's gotten like so confident and she can say all that stuff. But like, I think that we've always had like a really great like ground of like respect for each other, right? Wouldn't you agree, Christy?
Absolutely. Actually, remember I came to your class one time after we were done. So it's funny. It was professor, student, then opponents, and now just friends. And we've always, like, even though we don't always agree, we still just have always had care for one another, and like we respect each other, and it's always a really great relationship that we've had to be able to discuss these kinds of things.
100%. And actually that time that you came into the class, I'm glad you said that, because actually the students loved that so much. They couldn't believe it. First of all, they couldn't believe that, first of all, I invited a Republican into the class. That was like the first thing. Like, oh my gosh. And then I was like, yeah, she was an FGCU student. She was sitting like in your spot just a few years ago, right? So like, you want to run for office, look what you can do. And I'm telling you, like the light bulb moment for so many students in that class, and the fact that they could see that, yeah, you can have different opinions and still be cool with each other, right? Like that was such a huge thing. So definitely like thank you for that as well. Yeah, good. So we're starting here, and by the way, we are hoping at some point here to be able to go back into our in the bar format. And but we just have not been able to find a new location. As you remember, we had been at Millennial Brewing, and thank you so much, Millennial Brewing, for hosting us for like about a year now. But Christy lives further south, so we're actually hoping to find a venue that's a little bit closer. So if you happen to know anybody, or you happen to be an owner of a restaurant or a cafe or something along those lines and would like to host our podcast, that's in Bonita, Estero, North Naples, something along those lines, we would love to find a new location, because part of what, at least has always been my goal, and actually what Sean and I, when we started this podcast like 3 years ago now, oh my gosh, was that we wanted to be able to have a space where, like, so we're having a conversation and doing the show, but then we're also like, we're having a drink with friends, right? And so we would invite other folks to come and also have that discussion with us, like before and after the show. So I'm hoping that we can get back to that as well, because I think building bridges is going to be a really important thing.
Well, especially given everything that's happened recently and the way some people are coping and talking about it and dealing with it, I think this kind of format is more important than ever to realize. I'm like, just because you disagree does not mean you have to hate each other. And you can have a good relationship with somebody for years that is out of respect and care for one another, and still not agree on anything, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so, we were deciding to, in like launching and making the transitions. And then of course we had seen the murder of Charlie Kirk. And so we kind of, we took that moment to take a breather, because it was really hot for everybody across the spectrum. But maybe that is where we start, Christy. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your thoughts and like what you had seen and experienced in relation to what had happened with Charlie Kirk.
So, again, like, I wasn't close friends with him, but I did know him. Actually, ever since it's happened, I am remembering and being reminded by other people so many times of, they're like, oh, you remember that time you and Charlie were at this event, and then we were all sitting together at a couch talking for like an hour about this or that. And there's so many memories now that I'm looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, I did know him for a time. And so it's, from a personal aspect, it was such a shock. And then the worst thing is, so I'm a teacher and I spent all day in the classroom, and I felt my phone buzzing in my pocket, but I'm with kids, so I'm not looking at my phone. And to get in the car and see that news was so jarring. And the thing is, that's why we paused last week, is because watching Erica give that speech addressing, the nation of what happened. The thing is, so many people and their reaction, what's so dismaying is seeing, especially on social media, how many people have said things like good riddance, it couldn't have happened to a better person, like nasty celebratory comments on what happened. And the issue is, not only was he a person at the end of the day, but there are still people dealing with this now, his wife included. So that's why when I texted you, I was like, I can't do this right now, because somebody who loved him and is the mother of his children, his parents, his family are suffering through this. And it was just the lack of humanity that I've seen has also been matched by the extreme kindness. So it's both sides of the pendulum. You see absolute horrific people, and how they've responded in the nastiest, most unkind ways. But then you also see the opposite side, where people are actually being kinder. Even I've seen a bunch of Democrats say, hey, look, I did not like anything he had to say, but no one deserves to have this happen to them. And he was the leader of a movement that meant a lot to a lot of people. And so to see people come together was also something a little more uplifting. So it's not like I'm saying he didn't die in vain, but at least there is some sort of silver lining, that there is hope, or there is some possible positive outlook that maybe things will change, and maybe this is a learning moment of how we deal with things in the future.
I appreciate your optimism on that. But I do want to say, I just want to acknowledge that, you did know him. And because he, like, I think it's very weird being in Florida sometimes because, like, actually we know and we interact with, like, a lot of people who do a lot of things on, like, the national scale as well. Like, it's a very weird thing because everybody kind of comes through here. So, yeah, I mean, I just want to acknowledge that, how, like, how much more difficult it is to deal with a death like this when it is somebody that you've known and met personally. Even if it's not like you were best friends and calling them every day, it hits you different when you know, because it's real. Like, and that's one of the things that's kind of weird about this era that we're in, and this social media and video, and like, you can see things and they're so far away, and we get desensitized to it. And I think all of us are at this point. And so I just want to acknowledge and, like, say, I'm sorry for the loss and the grief that you feel from knowing somebody who has been affected by gun violence, because I think that is, like, a horrible thing. And, I just want to appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate you appreciating it. To me, it's more just what it represents is that the motive is still not 100% clear, but what we know of the engravings on the bullets, and the messaging in his text messages and communications prior to the incident, we understand that this came from political hatred, and this violence so it's also from the personal level of, it's not just that it was somebody I knew, it was because his belief system or his ideals or his values in a lot of ways are similar to mine. Sometimes I completely disagree with them, but to understand that there are people out there willing to kill for this ideology that they support and hate us. It's that fear, knowing that somebody hates my ideals enough that they would want me dead as well. And that's where I think a lot of people are responding. And I think that's why so many people have taken it personally, even if they didn't know him.
So let's talk about that, because this is, like, also one of, like, the fallout things, right? And something that I have, like, an open demand for apology from the city of Fort Myers Mayor Kevin Anderson, because he initially, before we knew who the shooter was, before there was any sort of inclination as to what had happened, he immediately started blaming the left. And frankly, when you're blaming the left in the city of Fort Myers, you're talking about me. Right? Like, you're talking about me. And so I took it very personal that he was basically calling out for retribution against me and people like me, and basically more than half of the people of the city of Fort Myers. So I was very upset about that reaction, that especially when leaders did that, because it's a little bit more powerful than just random people saying it. Okay. When the city of Fort Myers leader was saying, this is the left, they are responsible for this, they are evil, and they have woken the sleeping giant, basically alluding to, like, a pushback on it. I was very upset with that. And what has been, I don't know if it's interesting or disconcerting at this point, but if you're starting to actually look at the types of things that this person who's the alleged shooter was involved in, it's actually not a right left thing. It's like a whole other world of stuff that is part of this really niche world online, right? That is not, like, again, so it's not the traditional Republican versus Democrat. It's not even the right versus left. It's kind of, there's a group of folks online who are being radicalized in ways that I think it's really hard for those of us who are not in those, like, dark web spaces to even understand. And which is why I initially, after, my first reaction was to say no, no political violence, no political rhetoric or violent rhetoric, because those are two things that I've been extremely concerned about, the uptick in over the past few years. Like, that's something, especially the violent political rhetoric is really, I think, fueled the flames of folks. And then, I don't know. I was like, I immediately realized, like, oh man, this is going to be very bad. Because
Do you mind if I ask?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What exactly did he say? Because I missed that. What
Oh,
did
Mayor
Mayor say?
Anderson.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
actually put the click in. It was a very, it's super long.
Oh.
It was like a paragraph screed, and it was like, then it ended with like, this is the left's fault, and you've woken the sleeping giant. And then in the comments, he was replying to things that when people were saying like, oh, all Democrats are evil, and he's like, yeah, amen.
Okay.
And so those were the things I was like, hey, just want to clarify that this is what you meant. And then he kind of started engaging with me in what I would describe as like a less than productive way. So
I didn't see it, so I can't specifically like speak to what he said or whether it was okay or not because I haven't seen it. I don't know yet. So I just Googled it so I can read it later. But that is exactly part of the problem. So I totally get where you're coming from. Because here's what happened. If you want to be extremely practical about it, we have had a history of, let's be honest, the Democrat representatives using words like fascist, akinning Trump to Hitler. They've used very powerful language that is fear mongering in nature, and it's meant to depict somebody as somebody so ruthless, so horrible, so violent that somebody who is super radical might take action on it. There's always that possibility. If we're going to be completely fair, you have to recognize that that kind of rhetoric can incite violence, and it might have incited violence with this individual. We're not sure until there's been a jury trial and we've seen all the evidence. But from a practical standpoint, particularly using the same standard that Democrat representatives, and when I say Democrat representatives, I'm talking about like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, very vocal, representatives that are of the Democrat Party that have used that language. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has stated that Trump incited violence with his words. And, you and I can go back to January 6th and we could talk about his exact words, march peacefully over to the Capitol. We don't even have to debate that anymore. But if the standard is that that was inciting, then arguably those Democrat elected officials are inciting as well. So it's like, then on the other side of the coin, so we've had this act of violence. Now because again, I'm not saying that this is what Mayor Anderson did because I haven't said it, but to say it's the Democrats' fault and give a blanket statement is doing the same thing. And so it's this vicious, endless cycle of you're bad, no, you're bad, you're evil, you're the problem. And that's exactly how this act of violence manifested in the first place. There is a responsibility to stop the fear mongering, at least amongst elected officials. People are going to be people. They have a right to speak their mind. Freedom of speech, absolutely. So if you want to point blame, if you want to say these things, absolutely, it's your right. It's your opinion. But if you're going to willingly place blame on an opposing party, then you are welcoming blame to be put on you as well for doing the same thing. So that's why, I think the responsibility at the end of the day squarely lands with the person. So with Tyler Robinson, who was the assassin, But
alleged.
If you want to address it, go ahead.
Was it alleged? He's a suspect, right? He's the alleged.
Alleged. You're correct. Alleged.
Come on, attorney. Attorney McLaughlin.
Good catch there. Yes, the alleged assassin. I'm sorry to laugh about this. This is a very serious matter, but yes, being careful with my language. But the responsibility is squarely with who actually committed that violence. And we can have accountability amongst ourselves, especially elected officials and their language or talking heads as well, and what they've said and done that might have, fanned the flames. But at the end of the day, it's not okay to just start pointing fingers and saying it's your fault. No, it's your fault. You're the bad guy, because that's what started this culture that we have in the first place.
Right. Yeah, actually. And I agree with that. especially because it was like the day of the event, right? It's like we had no information at that point. And I was very worried about that. And I will say that I will push back on the fascist thing, because we can talk about that and what that means, because I go by like a very like academic definition of it, as opposed to just, I mean, that's why it's like I don't call, they're not a Nazi, right? People are Nazis because Nazis like the thing in Germany. But fascism is like there's actually a definition of it, and you can like kind of analytically, as a political science scholar, which is me, can determine whether or not something is or is not that thing. But what I do think that you're correct in saying that the officials who have, and people who have very large platforms, right? They do have somewhat of a different responsibility, particularly elected folks, from not fanning the flames in this. And actually, this is something that right here on this podcast we've talked about a lot, because as much as the right will say, okay, well, the fascist thing and the Nazi thing, and that makes us feel upset. Well, I've been upset since Chair Ziegler of the Florida GOP said he's going to eliminate all Democrats. So there's definitely like this uptick on both sides about what it means, right? Because we are in this fear-based media culture right now. Like, a lot of people have determined you can make a lot of money by getting a whole bunch of people ginned up, right? Which is unfortunate for us, I think, at this point in time. But we do have somebody who's been commenting, so thank you for those of us. And by the way, encourage anybody else, if you're watching on live on Facebook or YouTube, like, please go ahead and comment, and we'll like read and respond. We have DeBrad here, who is saying that everybody wants to believe that they're on the good team, which means they need an evil group to dehumanize and hate. And I definitely think that rhetoric is there. And I definitely think there are people who purposefully frame things like this for their own political advantage. So what do you think about that comment, Christy?
Well, definitely. So I on the side that I like to creative write. It's just like a personal hobby, something I do on the side. And when I'm teaching, especially English, I teach students Freytag's pyramid and like character conflict and things like that. For any engaging story, you need a conflict. So you need the main character versus something. It has to be against something. It can't all be hunky-dory the whole time. Life is just like that, particularly in a world of social media where you have to constantly be engaging people. You can't hold somebody's attention on something very long anymore before something shiny and new comes along and distracts them. So in politics, the desperate need to maintain attention, to keep voters engaged, to get donors to keep these campaigns going, that is such an essential part of that engagement. If I stoke some sort of we're the good guys, you're the bad guys, that conflict, it's almost part of this political theater. You invent a hatred that really gets people riled up and almost obsessed with the plot, right? And so the politicians that you support, you're part of the plot. It's just a story at this point, rather than being like, we're not good guys and bad guys. We are all, I would like to think, in the most optimistic way, the vast majority of us are trying to do good. We might differ on how we get there, but ultimately we all have an ideology of this is what I think is our future. This is how we get there. This is what I think is best for everybody. And that's why people get so heated when they hear somebody disagree as well. It's because I'm right, you're wrong. Rather than, okay, we have completely different mentalities, maybe different outcomes in mind. Maybe it's the same outcome and we just have different ways to get there. Yeah. But once there's that antagonism, it's stoked a little bit by good guy, bad guy. You must be a villain. You must have bad intentions. And so that's why, again, that this whole Charlie situation, it's still going. What we're seeing is he's either a good guy or a bad guy. It's either we're mourning him or he was the worst and I'm not going to say anything positive about him and good riddance. It's this constant pendulum swing where, I think it's not healthy for any of us. And at the end of the day, we need to realize real life and our future is not entertainment. We don't need to be so invested in the plot. We need to be like, I'm going to put aside my ego. Because, like, for example, you said, I'll defend the word fascist because I can define that. I'm like, I could get into it with you about who's a fascist and who's not any day. But at the end of the day, I know where you were coming from. You're defending, like, I'm not trying to just insult. I'm actually trying to be analytical. So I might disagree, but I'm not going to get into it with you because you're not the bad guy for having that reasoning. And so we can meet in the middle, and it might not be as entertaining to people, but if you and I can just sort of agree to disagree and be like, okay, as long as we both understand what we want right now is for the heat to come down. We want people to be more peaceful. We want a Democrat and Republican to be able to walk into a bar and to reasonably discuss without feeling like my life might be threatened because I said the wrong thing. And so we both have that outlook. And so no theater anymore. You're not the bad guy. I'm not the bad guy. You're not the good guy. I'm not the good guy. We're just people who have, a goal in mind that we think is best for our community.
Yeah, 100%. It's so funny. And I like the way that you frame that in terms of like the story arc. And I will say that, it used to not be like this. Let me start with that. It used to not be like this back in the day before we didn't have 24-hour media all the time and social media and people saying all sorts of stuff. I mean, politics was a lot more boring, to be honest. Like, it was exciting for me because I was a dork, and like, I would love to sit here with Christy for like the next 90 minutes and like, which aspects of fascism do you think are applied to which one and which historical precedents, blah, 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 blah. That would be really exciting for me and probably for Christy.
Maybe another episode. Yeah.
But like that is not as entertaining as it is to watch people fight and like to get people excited and to shout at people. And yeah, you're right to kind of point out, like, it's coming from the fact that there are people that are trying to make money and the donor, not the donors themselves, but like the consulting class that's like trying to make money off of this and the different PACs and the different groups. And I think they're very different than the folks who like really want to get in and get elected to something and do work. Because at least it used to be a far more like even keeled process where it was like you could go to the bar after work, and like chit chat and like have a discussion on it. And if you didn't agree whether or not you should have more taxes or less taxes, like, who cares, right? Like, because the other thing that you said that it was a recurring theme as I've been talking to folks about this is this: we may have the same goal, but the path that we get there is different, or the reasons that we want that are different, which is also an interesting thing. But I do think that that's perhaps where we can build common ground between people to have conversations where the temperature is like just click down a little bit.
Down in it. It's okay. Like, just everyone have a seat. Like, it's cool.
Right. Exactly. So yeah. Thank you so much, DeBrad, for bringing that up. They did add some other comments in there about it being like basic psychology and stuff, and 100%. Like, that's I actually talk with a lot of folks too, especially when they're getting like super ginned up about something. I'm always like, okay, stop. Why do you think that? Like, and like, who benefits by having you think that? Who benefits by having you so angry about this?
Well, you also pointed out the money part. Like, so I mentioned it about fundraising. And here's the thing. I don't know if you remember when we were running against each other. And technically, you and I weren't even running against each other. We were running in our primaries, but I digress. So in 2020, my I guess tagline or my campaign slogan was unbought, unbossed, unburdened, because I made it a point to not take money from, people that I didn't feel like they would let me do my job. Like, there was always a lingering sentiment, especially with PACs, like these super PACs, that if we help you get elected and we give you money, then you better listen to us and take our consulting when you're voted in. But that's not what politics is about. You donate to a candidate because you want them to get elected, and they have to have some money to be able to get the name recognition. And so like you should donate to the candidate and be like, okay, I chose you and I trust you. Maybe I'm going to disagree with your decision making sometimes, but no, just because I gave you money and helped you get elected does not mean you get to be with like a puppet master controlling the results. And I'm not, I'm not alluding to any particular elected person, but it's just there is that lingering possibility when money is involved that people feel like they bought their influence over a legislator. And so the thing is, we're not bad guys.
Exactly what it is.
Right.
And then they do it. And listen, half the time, and there are people in the state of Florida who are like this, there are people all over the country, and it's like they're literally given scripts of things that they're supposed to say. They're given bills that they are meant to pass because
it does happen.
Have like this interest. Like, okay, here's the thing. So what we want you to pass in Tallahassee. Here's the bill. I mean, listen, Tiffany Esposito here in Southwest Florida got caught doing that. Like literally her lobbyist wrote the bill that they wanted, and then she submitted it, and then in like the text, like, when you go back in like Microsoft Word, like who wrote it, they were still there. And like people were mad because they were calling her out saying, oh, was this written by a lobbyist? And she's going, oh, no. And then all they did was take the file and found it. So I think it's that kind of stuff that really aggravates people when it's like, okay, fine, you're going to do it. Or, I mean, or like own it, I guess, maybe be like, yeah, I think this is really good. That's why I took their money. But
again, because it's an allegation until there's like a jury trial or any sort of investigation, we can't really speak to what happened there. But perhaps she's been consulted and she just, I don't know, maybe it's consultation. I won't speak to that particular circumstance. But
you can look up, there were news press and WGCU articles both on those things. This is like 2-3 years ago at this point, but.
And my point though is like until there's an official investigation or an official disposition, I'm not going to speak specifically to that. But what I will say is 100% agree with you that it does happen. And so like I'm not going to say who or what right now, but I can say yes, you are right. There is that influence, and that's why I mentioned that sentiment. And the thing is, the worst part of it is now officially impossible to get elected without money.
Yeah.
Right. So I lost my primary, but I was 24 years old and I was the one person amongst started, I think, with like 12 of us, and then it got down to 9 on the ballot. And I was the most underfunded candidate in the entire primary race. I still turned out nearly 5% of that primary vote. I beat 3 other guys that had way more money than me. Actually, one of them, I had so much respect for him, and I were actually good friends. And right before debates, I'd be like, good luck, buddy. See you later. I'm excited, and I had a lot of respect. But I did something that was very unique. I utilized a lot of social media tools that weren't used at that time. Like I don't know if you remember, I campaigned on Tinder.
Okay, I was going to say that. I remember. It's like I was like, I gotta call Christy and ask how to do that.
Well, I got banned from it because I was like, swipe right. I was like, I'm not here to date, but I do want to talk about politics. Swipe right if you want to vote. And so I'd be sitting there messaging like 10 to 20 people at a time, like for hours, just doing this thing. And so I had some great conversations, but then there were a few gentlemen that were upset that I wasn't taking the dating app seriously. And so they reported me and I got banned. But I was trying to be unique and different. And it worked. It was, something that worked for the time. But that was a one-off. Anyone showing up in a campaign nowadays with only $19,000, you will probably come dead last. That's just how it works. I mean, look at the current District 19 landscape right now in the Republican primary. There are already like 7 to 8 people that maybe not officially announced, but they're running.
I think there's like 7 to 8 like official, and then there's others. And like this is not even the big people.
It's not even, and even then there is a candidate that's already raised $2 million. And so it's begun.
I think that was his own money, so I'm not sure if that counts.
Right. But regardless, my point is that it costs money. So when I was saying that it's this weird
Yeah.
balance to keep people engaged, because there is a desperate need to get donors, because you're not going to win. So even if you have the best of intentions, you find yourself desperate to have to do anything you can, campaign on Tinder if you have to try to engage voters as best you can, because otherwise you're never going to get in. And
Yeah.
it's such a big money business right now.
Okay, so I have a question for you. All right, as a Republican, as a conservative, right? You define yourself as a conservative. Okay,
Yes.
so with that thought in mind, what would be a solution that you would propose?
For less money, for
Yeah,
less money being like the source of
to
campaigning.
have like that influence and to make it like somewhat more whatever competitive.
Right. So I would probably, so I'm not saying this is a solution necessarily, but it's just a thought. More limits on what you can raise, limits on what you can spend. And also limits on, just because you're not personally spending it from your campaign funds, limits on how much a PAC can donate in mailers and things like that. Because again, it's an issue of, are you really the best candidate, or are you the one that just had the most money to get your name out there and no one else knew the other candidates because all they saw was your content every commercial break or every mailer every
That that had a text message scandal on the election day.
right. So there was, I know that there was like a lawsuit that went out, and I'm not sure if the appeal is still pending, because here's the thing.
It
I'll,
is.
I'll tell you, like, I'll talk about, is it still pending? So
I
I
think
don't know the
yeah, it's still pending.
I legitimately do not know. I could tell you what either side has told me, and what I
All right,
can tell you is
so let me give the preface and then you tell us. Okay, so what I'm actually alluding to is the fact that in the 2020 primary, Byron Donalds had a series of mysterious text messages that went out saying he dropped out of the race on like the day before the primary, right? It was the day before the primary, okay? And
it was,
this
I think,
then
the
kind
day
of
of
created,
that
yeah, it
morning.
was the day of, okay,
Yeah.
right. And then so this created this like hubbub of like, oh my gosh, is he or isn't he? And it then people were talking about it. So the other thing I want to say before Krista gives her he said inside intel is that this is like a quote unquote like a common uh
Uh-oh.
underdog where it is like when are you back? Oh, sorry. Can
Yes,
you hear
I'm
me?
back. Yes.
Okay. No, sorry, my thingy went thing. I said this is a common campaign strategy where you're the underdog, you think you're going to lose, and then you quote burn down your campaign office on election day, and then you get media coverage all day, and that's enough just to push you over. Now, that's kind of the backdrop of what I'm alluding to here. But let's hear the inside he said from Christy.
So this is, I'll tell you all the rumors that I heard, and I'll tell you all sides that I understand. So from Byron's perspective, he believed that, I think it was Casey Asgar that put that text message out to try to get people to not vote for Byron, vote for Casey, because they thought that Byron wasn't running anymore. Casey has made comments, and I think there was a lawsuit saying that it wasn't him and that was defamatory. And for all we know, it could have even been Byron's office, just to, like you said, the underdog comment. Honestly, it's still pending, and I haven't seen evidence for either. So I'm like, I don't blame Casey. I don't blame Byron, because for all we know, it was somebody else who did this, and it's a third party, and some people have thrown out names, and it's just like, to me, yes, that was a wild situation. What is most alarming to me, though, is that there isn't any evidence that has come up since. That's what frightens me the most about that whole circumstance. Because what I will tell you is, Byron and I have spoken to Byron since. We have had great conversations. There's a lot of respect between us, and him and I are cool. Casey, him and I had a whole sit down. Him and I are cool. We respect each other just fine. And so I don't want to believe either of them had a part in this. But the thing is, what's most alarming is, I don't know. There is no, like, because you would think that there'd be some way to sort of trace the source of something this astronomically large. And I know it's just Southwest Florida, but I mean, that's a lot of text messages that got sent out. And you mean to tell me there's no way to find like at least which server it came from or something like that?
So what I do remember, so the case, it was Casey Askar was suing Byron Donald for defamation because Byron Donald went on the news that day and said, oh, he believed it was Casey Askar's campaign. So that was the case that's still pending. Now, there was an FBI investigation into this, I believe, that came up with nothing.
But that's what's so scary. How can we not find that? Like, you would think, because as a voter, I want to darn know who did this, you know?
I agree.
Like, I would like to know.
I would say, like, my answer, this is just like what I think is happening, is the FBI investigation just was like, meh, like they didn't want to mess with it anymore, right? To be honest, because I think they did. There were plenty of things that went out in the press that said that it came from a consulting firm. It came from a consulting firm that was connected to Ted Cruz, who had actually done this in Ted Cruz's race. So whether or not it was initiated by Byron Donald's campaign or if it was like somebody else, who knows? But there was things that they knew, and yeah, I think DeBrad put it here, like, does the FBI truly work for the voters? I don't know. I have less and less faith in any of our government institutions these days. And so I think it might have been just one of those things where they're like, whatever, like, let it ride. And it is what it is. But wait, hold on, I can't hear you.
We're having in District 19. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Wait, can you start over?
Hello.
I can hear you.
Yes, but can you hear me? Is it good? Okay, good. Yeah. So, I agree. Like, to have a lack of faith in our government institutions when there is no answer, that's their job, because we have an open primary again. Now we have an open seat in District 19. And so now my vote, I'm concerned every time. I'm like, we've never resolved some of these. And that was, whatever it was, that was an attempt to interfere with the election. Uh-oh, did I lose you again?
Hello?
Can you see? Can you hear me? Are you good?
Gosh, yeah. I don't know.
I feel like the Verizon guy.
I know, right? So last I heard from you is that you said, that this was that we should be able to trust the FBI and our government, and this is the kind of thing that erodes trust in the elections, because this is essentially election interference.
So because again, we've got an open seat, and now I'm like, we didn't resolve the issue last time, and for all I know, there's going to be another incident that results in my vote being, not my 100% faith or knowledgeable vote. Does that make sense? I want to make sure that I'm completely informed when I vote, and if there's still something unresolved, for all I know, something else is happening that will result in my changing my mind.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And sorry, I see in there, DeBrad said that we were both losing connection. So I apologize. I don't know. We'll edit it out of the original podcast. But yeah, I know, like that was a really interesting, thing. And I agree that it, definitely doesn't add to the trust that we have in our systems right now. Which that's a whole mountain to climb as well. But so we're about 10 minutes to the hour here. And so before we leave today, Christy, is there any other like issue or like maybe something local or anything that you want to kind of poke on?
I wanted to know your thoughts on Jimmy Kimmel.
Oh, Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the Democrats are really going to hate this answer. I don't know how many fucks I have left to give. I mean, really, like, listen. Okay, do I think that it was cool for Trump to demand this, and then there was some pressure from the FCC on whatever mergers and stuff? No. Do I think that that's a problem? Yes. But frankly, there's like bigger fish to fry in terms of what's going on for me to care about Jimmy Kimmel. The other thing that I will say about this, and I was like discussing this with my husband, is that I think one of the biggest issues that we have that is not specifically coming from Trump, and we'll talk about that later too. But one of the biggest issues that I see is this incredible conglomeration and power consolidation on the behalf of companies, right? So if you were mad at or about Jimmy Kimmel, right? People are going, oh well, like go cancel Disney and Hulu, but it's like Disney, ABC, NBC, Hulu, Sony. It's a giant fucking company, man.
Yeah.
And so like
then we lose Warner Brothers, right? Because they bought them too. It's like we lose everything. Right. Yeah.
Look who do you have? Nothing. So it's like, so I guess it's like the point is these companies now have, because we've gone through an era of like, now we're going back to the monopoly. So I think the only way that we're going to get back to having more consumer choice and more consumer power, more market power, frankly, is to get back to an antitrust era. But that was really for me. So that was the takeaway of the Jimmy Kimmel thing for me, because I'm a complete fucking dork. And I was like, wow, I'm not going to cancel Disney because I also can't cancel every single other thing that I have or do related to that company.
And you know what? And I really respect how you also mentioned that you just don't care right now about Jimmy Kimmel. Of all things that we're really having a meltdown over, Jimmy Kimmel had low ratings. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to point out the hypocrisy. I'm like, y'all canceled Tucker Carlson, and you were on your soapbox of, to quote AOC, deplatforming works, and he needs to be held accountable. AOC said that he was inciting violence and he needed to have lost it. Okay, so if you're going to say that, then you need to not say a single word after Jimmy Kimmel gets canceled. Also on the fact that he had poor ratings and it wasn't a very good show and it wasn't doing very well. So there was pressure from the opposite party back then when they were in power to cancel other people. So it's kind of like, really, do I really have to spend more time worrying about who gets their multi-million-dollar contract to host a TV show?
Yeah,
I just don't
I didn't give a shit when Tucker Carlson got fired either. I mean, honestly, then Tucker Carlson went on Twitter and done a bunch of other stuff. And honestly, he seems a lot happier. So,
and like, honestly, like, you still have the power to speak, Jimmy Kimmel. You go on your X account and say whatever you want. No one's stopping you. But a platform doesn't have to pay for you to say it. And so I really don't care that you lost your multi-million-dollar annual salary so you can spend a couple of hours yapping on TV. Like, really? I'm really not too concerned.
I do think that there was a slightly, okay, and this is like the nuances and like the differences, because I think you can look and say, okay, yeah, Tucker Carlson and Jimmy Kimmel kind of like very similar in terms of the way and like the suddenness of how they were fired, but they were different situations, because in my view, it was very much, you could see that there was Trump and the administration that was kind of saying things that they didn't like, and the company was responding to that. When it comes to Tucker Carlson, that seemed to be more like the company was responding to other public pressure, but it wasn't necessarily coming from the president and the administration. So,
but I would also argue, like, there were legislators that were trying to pressure. They were galvanizing their base as much as they could. I get where you're coming from, but
when was the last time Congress did anything that fucking mattered?
That's the joke is that Congress can barely pass a bill, and then the Senate is where a bill goes to die. So it's like, when do we really get anything done anymore? So yeah.
So I mean, yeah, but I mean, so I guess for me, like, the nuances make it a slightly different thing, but I can understand why people are making the connection between that. But I don't know. Again, like, I don't care enough, because for me, there's like real things I'm worried about.
Yeah, I just gave you a virtual high five.
Okay. I'm costs, and like there's other stuff. The immigration, which we just really don't have time to dive into today. But we can talk about all that. I mean, there's this other stuff. And I think that's part of like the weirdness of the time right now, is that like it does feel to a certain extent to me like our attention is being manipulated.
Yeah. Exactly. Right? And so it's like Jimmy Kimmel can now start a podcast just like you and me, and he can go ahead and say it. No one's stopping him. This is not an infringement of free speech. It's just, no, you don't have to get paid your multi-million-dollar contract, and I don't really care if you are. Like, go ahead. You're not owed your night time slot through ABC, right? We figure it out. We're up here speaking because we're exercising our right. Everyone else has that right as well, and I really don't care about this meltdown that the left is having, that, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. Like, no one's stopping him.
I'm like, whatever. But I'm like, where's the Epstein files?
Yeah. Well, I have comments on that too, but we'll probably have
that'll be another episode. But it is funny because like the other thing that, and this is like definitely a criticism that's like of the left on the left, is that right now everything that happens is a distraction from somebody else. That's something else. That's what everybody's saying. Oh, well, whatever happened, what was the, I don't even know. Oh, the Charlie Kirk assassination was to distract you from the Epstein files, but the Epstein files were a distraction from the Iran war thing or the Venezuela war thing, whatever. And it's just like everything's a distraction. I'm like, no, wait a second. Like,
no, the problem is that there's a lot of issues going on, and we as a culture can't seem to focus. We're just like bing, 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 shiny new toy. Something else came in that we want to focus on. Yeah.
I know, right? Yeah. So like that is my like personal challenge. Like what I try to do, especially as like, you know, I'm running for office and, you know, I'm trying to like cut through the noise of like, okay, all these people are upset about that, but like that doesn't seem to be a big deal. Like, what are the things that are happening that do seem to be like a real issue people should maybe pay attention to?
Yeah, definitely.
Right. All right. Well, okay. So let's leave it on that because obviously we can dive into like 10,000 more issues. But what I'd like to do before I wrap the show is I would just like to give, not only just to say like, thank you, Christy, for joining the show. What a fabulous first episode you have had. Really appreciate it. But I wanted to give you just like a moment to have like a parting thought for folks. So what's your parting thought for today?
My parting thought for today is exactly the whole purpose of this podcast, is look at how chill you and I are. We were able to laugh and giggle. And even if like there was moments where I was like, I don't agree with you, but you know what? It's cool. Like, and same thing that you did with me. We can just have a conversation in the wake of what has happened with Charlie Kirk and what it represents. What we just did here is hopefully representative of how this country should be healing from that kind of violence. Because the response is not to keep pointing fingers. The response is, let's sit down, let's have a conversation, let's respect one another, and we can find joy in the conversation. And so this was delightful. This was super fun, and I'm so glad that like, you know, and this has always been how we are, you and I. We've always had this kind of rapport that even if we don't like what the other has to say or agree, we can laugh. And so my parting thought is that this podcast is awesome, and I hope that we're doing our small part together, and we'll continue to do our small part by having these conversations.
Yeah, wonderful. My parting thought is not about current issues, but to tell everybody that I am the worst indoctrinator in the planet.
You're not very good at it.
Terrible at left-wing indoctrination. But like, no, in all seriously, like the one thing that I always, and actually, and I know I think I've told you this before, but I'm going to tell everybody again on this podcast, like ever since like we reconnected when you were running, like I had nothing but like teacher pride. Like I was like, oh my gosh, look at her, she's doing so amazing. And like I just even like I'm getting goosebumps saying that. Like that's how like much of a sap I am. But literally, like from every student and that has ever crossed my threshold, from when they like the kindergarten babies that I used to teach back in Taiwan to the university students here, and there are thousands of them around the world at this point now, guys. The only thing I ever wanted for them was to be able to think and be able to look and analyze things in their own way. And I really tried my very hardest not to like shame anybody for wherever they landed. I just wanted them to know how they got there. Right. Like, and I would tell the students, and you were in global studies, but I was teaching American government as well. I was like, I don't care like where you want to go, but just have a think of like how you got there. Like, what does this align with does it align with your values? Are you just repeating something that somebody said, or did you really think about this issue? And I even would tell students too, I'm like, listen, if there's an issue that you don't know anything about or you don't care about, that's okay to say that, right? Like, you don't have to feel like every issue is your issue that you have to, care so much about that you're going to fight with everybody. You can just be like, hey,
you don't have to know everything either.
And you don't have to know everything, right? That's like what Jimmy Kimmel was like, I don't know if I care, right? and that's a totally legitimate position to have for folks. But just I'm actually so excited. I'm super excited for how the show is going to go out. Super excited to see Christy and all the steps and things that she's taken in her world. And I'll still always have like that teacher pride for everything that she does, because I think that is us, right? That's Americans. That's teachers. That's people in our community, and we should want to support and love one another in that way.
Lift each other up.
Even if we don't agree on everything all the time. And I think the more that we can kind of get back to that ideal, the better and the stronger we're going to be in this country.
Definitely.
I'm not going to cry, but thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on A Democrat and a Republican Walk Into a Bar. I'm your Democratic host, Dr. Cindy Banier.
And I'm Christy, your Republican host, Christy McLaughlin.
Right, Esquire. I put our honorifics on there, so we sound super smart.
Oh, JD. It's JD for me.
Oh, JD. Sorry, I'll change it from Esquire then.
You're good.
I don't know. You guys, you're all attorneys, like they got different honorifics. So I just want to make sure which ones you like.
It's lawyer. So.
All right. So, and this has been A Democrat and a Republican Walk Into a Bar on the Big Mouth Media Network. We do hope that you will join us for this episode. If you missed our live show, you can catch us on podcast audio version. You can get it free, download it on the Big Mouth Media website at www.bigmouthmediafl.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. That means Apple, Spotify, Audible, all that stuff. All you have to do is look for A Democrat and a Republican Walk Into a Bar or search Big Mouth Media, and you can listen and subscribe to our show there. And if you're there and you're listening to us there, please like and subscribe. Please give us 5 stars over there, because that is going to is how we're going to reach more people, especially with such an important message of how we can come together in such difficult times. So thanks once again for joining us here, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.